Greetings. I am Miss Noble, a student teacher at the University of Pretoria, and I am teaching English, first additional language for grade 9, reading skills on how to read a short story or a novel. By the end of the lesson, learners should be able to use simple strategies to read a story, identify important parts of the story, understand what to look for while reading, answer basic questions about a text. Good morning, grade nines. Morning. All right. When you read a story, do you understand everything immediately? Yes? No? All right. Okay. Um, Today we are learning how to read a story or a novel properly so that we understand it better. Good readers don't just read words, they look for meaning. In English, we have something that we call intensive reading. When we talk about intensive reading, we are talking about reading to understand, um, not just to read um, just by looking. Okay, all right. When reading a story, you have to look for characters, setting, events, and main idea. Characters, who is in the story? You have to be able to identify who is in the story, the people who makes the story interesting. Like who is in the story is what we call characters. Also, we have setting. Where and when does it take place? When we're talking about setting, the story could happen in a kitchen, a dining room, a sitting room. Sometimes the story do mention that we are in the kitchen with so and so, but sometimes you have to be able to identify that by yourself as a learner. Maybe if I say my sister and I are cooking and the stove is burning and whatever, so you have to be able to identify that by yourself because we mentioned in the story that we are cooking and there's a stove that obviously the story is taking place in the kitchen. And where does it take place? All right, some other stories do mention in the background that the story took place during an apartheid era, so we already know that the story maybe happened in 1994. So those are some of the things that you should pay attention to when reading a story or a novel. Also, events. What happens first, next, and last? All right. I'm just gonna make an example for you to understand this better. So you should be able to identify the events that happens in the story in their order. Like what happened first, what happened second, what happened last. So let me just make an example about a lion. Maybe a lion attacks a learner, and that's what happens first. And next, the learner dies. And last, now there's a funeral of a learner. So you should be able to identify that it started with an attack, then the next thing that happened, the learner died, and the last thing was the funeral. So you should be able to identify the events that happens in the story. Main idea, what is the story about? So you have to see while reading what is the story about, or what is it that the story is trying to teach you, or what message is the writer trying to pass on to you or to make you understand as a reader of the story or a novel. All right, short text example. So let's just try and identify the things that I just already mentioned to you as a class. So while reading, you have to be able to identify the characters, the setting, the events, or the problem, or whatever you can be able to identify. So I'm just gonna read this for you, and then I'm just gonna ask you guys questions. Okay. Sipo wake up late for school. He quickly gets dressed and runs to catch the bus. On the way, he forgets his money at home. A friend helps him by sharing money for school. All right. So, um, who is the character? What is the set? Where is the setting? Problem in the story and the solution. All right. Yolanda, your hand is up. The character is Sipo. Yes, correct. Clap hands for Yolanda. Yes, very good, Yolanda. And the setting, where and when is the story taking place? Andrew, it takes place in the morning and at school. Very good, Andrew. Clap hands for Andrew. Yes, very good. All right, what is the problem in the story? What is the problem that Sipo finds himself in? Yolanda, your hand is up again. Oh, Yamkela, the hand is up. Yes. What is the problem in the story? Forgetting money. Yes, yes, yes. Clap hands for Yamkela. Yes. What is the solution? The solution is the friend. No. What happens? Yes, the friend is there, but what is the solution? That's not the correct answer. The friend helps. Yes, with transport. Yes. Clap hands. Yes. All right. I'm glad you guys are understanding the whole um um thing about reading the novel or a short story. All right, thank you. Moving forward, we already answered who is the character, what problem did Sipo have, how is the problem solved. Learners quickly already answered those questions. Yes. All right. So we have an activity that we should do as a class. I'm not gonna ask this one. I'm not gonna ask you to answer as a whole class. I'm just gonna write it on the board, and then you take out your English exercise books and you write today's date. And on the board, I'm gonna write the sentence for you, and then you fill in the missing word that you think from everything that we spoke about today is the correct word, and then you fill in the sentence that I'm gonna write for you on the board. So the sentence is: good readers look for. Mm, that's where you are filling in when they read a story. So you're gonna write any answer from what we spoke about that you think is correct for this case. All right. To understand a story or a novel, we must not just read words, we must look for meaning, characters, setting, and events. In that way, that can show that you have read the story from the background, introduction, body, and the conclusion. So that is how we can be able to identify, because some other stories they can come out on your test and you'll have to tell us maybe after the questions, because sometimes the test is like 1 hour. So you should be able to identify those important things while reading, because sometimes you don't get to read the story as many times as you would want to. So it is very advisable and recommended to try and apply intensive reading every time you are reading a story. All right. Thank you for participating. And after writing the activity, I will give you a homework on how to write, and I'll give you a short story, and then you'll come back. You'll read the short story and answer the questions. And tomorrow we're gonna mark the homework. Thank you.